start with a really provocative idea. What if Europe's entire approach to foreign policy is just fundamentally broken? Well, we're about to dive into a bold new analysis that argues exactly that. And it doesn't just criticize, it proposes a pretty radical two-front strategy as the only way forward.
So the analysis kicks off with this really powerful image, right? Europe standing at a crossroads. But here's the twist. It argues the path Europe is on right now, it's a total dead end, one that's built on moral posturing instead of real strategic action. And this isn't just some fancy metaphor. It's presented as a diagnosis of a continent that's essentially paralyzed by two massive crises that are crashing into each other.
And wow, this critique gets straight to the point. This single phrase says it all. The argument is that Europe has become so focused on what feels right in principle that it's completely failing to achieve what's actually possible. And that's created this strategic paralysis that, in the end, doesn't really serve anyone.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the alternative? Well, it's a controversial, but you have to admit, coherent two-front strategy. So let's get into it and break down exactly what that means.
All right, first up, the diagnosis. The core idea here is that Europe is paralyzed on two absolutely critical fronts, and according to the analysis, it all stems from one fundamental mistake in how it even thinks about strategy.
And this right here, this is the heart of that mistake. The analysis argues Europe is chasing the best imaginable outcome. You know, the perfect, ideal victory that might not even be achievable. Instead, it should be focused on the best obtainable one, a durable, realistic result that you can actually build on. And honestly, that one distinction is the key to this entire strategy.
So this failure of what the analysis calls strategic intelligence isn't just theoretical. It's playing out in the real world on two major fronts. You've got the Eastern Front, with this grueling, costly stalemate in Ukraine, and then there's the Southern Front, where Europe is basically just standing by while Iran destabilizes the Middle East and its proxies attack global shipping.
So the big question is, how do you break this paralysis on the Eastern Front? The proposed solution for Ukraine is interesting. It's all built around a whole new economic architecture for peace. The proposal is a complex four-part settlement. It starts with a huge concession. Ukraine would permanently renounce NATO membership. But, and it's a big but, in return, it would get a fast-track right into the EU, which would act as an anchor for its sovereignty. Now, to pay for Reconstruction, the plan controversially suggests restoring some Russian gas transit and then using the fees to rebuild. The whole thing would be backed by a massive European financial package.
Now, this idea of a neutral but EU-integrated Ukraine isn't totally out of left field. The analysis points to a historical model, the Austrian State Treaty of 1955. It's a fascinating example of how a nation can secure its sovereignty and align with the West while staying militarily neutral, addressing Russia's stated security concerns without sacrificing Ukraine's independence.
Okay, so with a plan for the East, the strategy pivots to the South. The argument here is that Europe is treating Iran as a problem to be contained when it should be seen as a future that it can actually help shape.
And the stakes here are huge. The analysis frames a post-theocratic Iran not just as a security win, but as a massive economic prize. I mean, think about it. A highly educated population, vast energy reserves, and the central location for trade. This is the opportunity that, according to the author, Europe's current policy is actively squandering.
The choice is pretty stark. The current path means managing proxy networks, nuclear risk, and threats to shipping. The alternative, a future of regional stability and massive trade integration. The hard-hitting conclusion here is that Europe's inaction is effectively defending the status quo on the left.
But how do you get from the current reality to that potential future without creating total chaos? The paper argues Europe has to get proactive and support a transitional authority. It uses Reza Pahlavi as just one example of a figure who could potentially unify the opposition and prevent a really dangerous power vacuum.
And that leads us to the military part of the Southern strategy. It's a call for Europe to shift its entire naval posture from simply defending against attacks to actively deterring them.
The proposal calls for an Operation Aspides 2.0, a major upgrade to Europe's current naval mission. This means three things. First, extend its range to the vital Strait of Hormuz. Second, work much more closely with the U.S. Navy. And third, and this is crucial, change the mission from defense to deterrence, giving it the power to neutralize threats before they even strike.
The analysis frames this in really stark terms.
Europe's current maritime posture isn't neutrality. It's a choice to be a strategic free rider. In this view, Europe is just letting others secure its own economic lifelines, and forfeiting any real say in the process.
Okay, this is where it all comes together. How do the plans for Ukraine and Iran actually connect? Well, they're presented as two halves of a single, powerful grand strategy.
The central insight here is that Europe has to stop treating Ukraine and Iran as if they're isolated problems. According to this view, they are interlocking pieces of the exact same strategic puzzle.
And here's how the two tracks are designed to create a kind of virtuous cycle. A stable peace in the East reduces Europe's energy vulnerability. A transformed South removes proxy threats. You put them together, and you free up Europe's resources and political will to actually focus on the future.
Ultimately, the analysis concludes with a really powerful message about this idea of strategic autonomy. It's not a status you just declare, it's a reality you have to demonstrate through decisive action, especially when the choices are difficult and the costs are real.
And so, the analysis leaves us with a provocative final question. Will Europe take the reins and actively shape its own future, or will it just be forced to accept a future that's been shaped by others? It's a big question to think about.